The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the dusty depot in Aztec, New Mexico territory, and Penelope Everton pressed her gloved hand against her chest, feeling her heart hammer beneath her corset as she peered through the window at the small frontier town that would become her new home. It was May of 1883, and at 38 years old, she had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston to marry a man she had never met, a rancher named Quentin Garrett, who had advertised for a wife in the matrimonial newspaper. The correspondence between them had been brief but courteous, and he had sent money for her passage along with assurances that he would provide a good home. What he did not know, what she had carefully avoided mentioning in her letters, was that she had shaved 8 years off her actual age when she wrote to him. The guilt had gnawed at her during the entire journey west, but desperation had driven her to the deception. Her brother had died 6 months earlier, leaving her without family or means of support. The small boarding house where she had worked as a seamstress closed its doors when the owner passed away, and at her age, prospects for employment or marriage in Boston had been non-existent. When she saw Quentin's advertisement seeking a woman of good character, age 30 or thereabouts, she had penned her response with trembling hands and a heavy conscience. Now, as the driver opened the door and offered his hand to help her down, Penelope straightened her spine and lifted her chin. She was a handsome woman still, with rich auburn hair only lightly touched with silver at the temples, clear gray eyes, and a figure that remained trim despite the years. Perhaps he would not notice. Perhaps it would not matter. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the main street of Aztec, a collection of wooden buildings that seemed to huddle together against the vast expanse of desert surrounding them. Penelope stepped onto the packed earth, her traveling dress already growing damp with perspiration in the New Mexico heat, and scanned the handful of people who had gathered to watch the stage's arrival. A tall man detached himself from the shadow of the general store and walked toward her with measured strides. He was lean and weathered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. His dark hair, shot through with silver, fell past his collar beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and he moved with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own skin. Penelope judged him to be in his early 40s, though it was difficult to tell with men who spent their lives working outdoors. "Miss Everton." His voice was deep and rough, like gravel sliding over stone. "Yes, Mr. Garrett, I presume," he nodded once, his gaze traveling over her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Penelope felt her cheeks flush with more than just the heat. She waited for the disappointment to register in his expression, for the inevitable questions about her age. Instead, Quentin Garrett removed his hat and held it against his chest. "Madam, I hope you will forgive my bluntness, but I must speak plain. Your letters said you were 30 years old." Penelope's throat tightened. Yes, I apologize, Mr. Garrett. I understand if you wish to. You are older than that," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "And I want you to know something right now, before we go any further." He paused, and something softened in his weathered face. "Age has only made you more beautiful. The woman standing before me is far lovelier than any girl of 30 could ever be." The words struck her like a physical blow, unexpected and overwhelming. Penelope blinked rapidly, fighting against the sudden burning in her eyes. "You are very kind, Mr. Garrett, but you do not need to." "I am not being kind. I am being truthful." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell leather and sage and something uniquely masculine. "I have lived 43 years on this earth, Miss Everton, and I learned long ago that youth is no substitute for character. The lines around your eyes tell me you have lived and learned. The silver in your hair tells me you have weathered storms. These things do not diminish your beauty. They enhance it. Penelope found herself unable to speak. In all her life, no man had ever spoken to her with such frank admiration. She had been considered a handsome woman in her youth, had received her share of compliments, but nothing had prepared her for the raw sincerity in Quentin Garrett's voice. "I do not deserve such generous words," she finally managed. "I deceived you in my letters. I am 38, not 30, and I understand completely if you feel I have. 38. He said the number as if tasting it, then nodded. "A fine age, an age that speaks of wisdom and experience." He replaced his hat and gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. "If you are still willing to honor our agreement, Miss Everton, I would be honored to take you to my ranch and introduce you to your new home. The circuit judge comes through town once a month, and he will be here next week. That gives us time to become better acquainted before we make our vows official." Relief flooded through her so powerfully that her knees weakened. "I am willing, Mr. Garrett, more than willing. Then let us collect your trunk and be on our way. It is a 2-hour ride to the ranch, and I would like to arrive before sunset." As Quentin helped the driver unload her modest trunk and secured it in the wagon bed, Penelope studied her future husband more carefully. He was not a handsome man in the conventional sense, but there was something compelling about his features, a strength in the line of his jaw and the set of his shoulders that spoke of reliability. His hands, when he offered them to help her into the wagon, were calloused and scarred but gentle. They left Aztec behind, following a rutted trail that wound through rolling hills covered in scrub brush and juniper trees. The San Juan Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the warmth of late spring. Quentin drove the wagon with practiced ease, his attention divided between the road and his passenger. "Tell me about Boston," he said after a while. "I have never been further east than Kansas City." Penelope folded her hands in her lap, grateful for the neutral topic. "It is a different world from this. Buildings pressed close together, streets filled with carriages and people, always noise and movement. I lived there my entire life until now. What made you decide to leave?" The question was gentle but direct, and Penelope found herself responding with equal honesty. "My brother died last winter. He was my only family. Without him, I had no one and no means of support beyond my work as a seamstress, which was barely enough to pay for a room. When the boarding house closed, I faced the prospect of the poorhouse or worse." She paused, then added quietly, "Your advertisement offered hope when I had none." Quentin was silent for several moments, his jaw working as if he were chewing on her words. "I am sorry for your loss. Losing family is a hard thing." He glanced at her, and she saw understanding in his eyes. "My wife died 7 years ago. Fever took her in the space of 3 days. We had no children, and since then I have managed the ranch alone with the help of 2 hired men. It is a lonely life." "Is that why you advertised for a wife?" "Partly." He guided the horses around a large boulder in the road. "But also because I have land and a home, and it seems a waste for one man to rattle around in it alone. I am not getting any younger, Miss Everton. I wanted a partner, someone to share the work and the rewards, someone to talk to in the evenings. Companionship, I suppose, more than anything else." His words touched something deep inside her. "I understand completely. Loneliness is a heavy burden." "It is indeed." He smiled then, and the expression transformed his face, making him almost handsome. "But perhaps we can lighten that burden for each other." The ranch appeared as they crested a low rise, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley where a creek cut through the landscape like a silver ribbon. The main house was constructed of adobe and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and one side. Behind it stood a barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse for the hired men. Cattle grazed in the near pasture, their red and white hides bright against the golden grass. "It is not fancy," Quentin said as he drove the wagon down the slope toward the house, "but it is solid and paid for. 300 acres of grazing land, water rights to the creek, and a small herd of about 200 head of cattle. I also keep horses, some for ranch work and some I raise to sell." "It is beautiful," Penelope said honestly. The setting was wildly different from anything she had known, but there was something appealing about the openness, the sense of space and possibility. 2 men emerged from the barn as they approached, both young and sun-browned, wearing the typical garb of working cowboys. Quentin raised a hand in greeting and brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "Miss Everton, these are my hired men, James Crawford and Tom Miller. Boys, this is Miss Penelope Everton from Boston. She will be the lady of this house come next week." Both men swept off their hats and offered respectful nods. James, the taller of the two with a shock of blonde hair, grinned widely. "Pleased to meet you, madam. It will be nice to have a woman's touch around here. The boss is a good rancher but a terrible cook." "I heard that," Quentin said mildly, but there was humor in his voice. "Make yourselves useful and bring Miss Everton's trunk inside." He helped Penelope down from the wagon, his hands strong around her waist, and for a moment they stood very close. She caught her breath at the unexpected flutter of awareness that passed through her. It had been so long since she had felt anything like attraction that she had almost forgotten the sensation. The interior of the house was simply furnished but clean, with whitewashed walls and dark wooden beams supporting the ceiling. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. 2 doors led off to what Penelope assumed were bedrooms. "The room on the right was my wife's," Quentin said quietly. "I have kept it ready for you. The other is mine. After we are married, you may choose to keep your own room or share mine. That decision is yours to make." The delicacy of his words surprised and touched her. "Thank you for your consideration." He showed her through the house, pointing out the root cellar, the well just outside the back door, the hen house where a dozen chickens scratched and clucked. Everything was well maintained and orderly, the home of a man who took pride in his possessions. That evening, Quentin prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and salt pork, while Penelope sat at the rough-hewn table and watched. The domesticity of the scene felt surreal after the chaos and uncertainty of recent months. When he set a plate before her, their fingers brushed, and she felt that spark of awareness again. "Tell me about your wife," she said as they ate, "if it does not pain you too much to speak of her." Quentin chewed thoughtfully before answering. "Her name was Catherine. We married young, both of us barely 20. She was a good woman, hardworking and kind, but we were more friends than anything else. The fever came on sudden. One day she was well, 3 days later she was gone." He met Penelope's eyes. "I grieved her, but I will not pretend our marriage was a great romance. We cared for each other, but there was no passion. I tell you this because I want no secrets between us." "I appreciate your honesty." Penelope set down her fork. "I have never been married. There was a man once when I was 22, but my father disapproved of the match. By the time my parents passed and I was free to make my own choices, the man had married someone else. After that, there were no other serious prospects. I devoted myself to caring for my brother and making a living with my needle." "Do you regret not marrying when you were younger?" "Sometimes, but regret changes nothing. We must make the best of the paths we have walked." She paused, then added softly, "I am grateful for this chance, Mr. Garrett. Whatever our reasons for entering into this arrangement, I promise to be a good wife to you." And I promise to be a good husband to you, Miss Everton." He reached across the table and took her hand, his touch warm and solid. "But I think, given the circumstances, you might call me Quentin. Only if you call me Penelope, Penelope." He said her name slowly, as if learning the shape of it. "It suits you." Over the following days, they fell into an easy routine. Penelope rose early to prepare breakfast for Quentin and the hired men, finding a surprising satisfaction in the domestic work. She had always been industrious, but there was something different about keeping house for people who appreciated her efforts. Quentin praised her cooking despite her limited skills with frontier fare, and the hired men treated her with unfailing courtesy. During the long afternoons when the men were out working with the cattle or mending fences, Penelope explored her new surroundings. She walked along the creek, discovering wildflowers she had never seen before, and sat on the porch watching hawks circle overhead. The silence of the desert was profound, broken only by the wind and the occasional call of a bird, and she found herself adjusting to it more quickly than she would have thought possible. In the evenings, after supper was cleared away and the hired men had retired to the bunkhouse, Quentin and Penelope sat together on the porch and talked. He told her about ranch life, about the challenges of raising cattle in the high desert, about his plans to expand the herd and perhaps add sheep as well. She told him about Boston, about the books she loved to read, about her skill with a needle and her hope that she might be able to earn some extra money taking in sewing work from the ladies in Aztec. "You do not need to work," Quentin said. "I can provide for us both." "I know. But I have worked all my life, and I think I would feel lost without something productive to occupy my time." "Then you should do whatever makes you happy." He rocked slowly in his chair, his gaze on the darkening sky. "I want you to be happy here, Penelope. That matters to me." The sincerity in his voice warmed her. "I think I will be. I already am, truthfully." On the 6th day after her arrival, Quentin saddled 2 horses and announced they were going for a ride. Penelope had not been on a horse since she was a girl, and she mounted awkwardly, her divided riding skirt tangling around her legs. Quentin watched with amusement, but offered no criticism, only gentle guidance as she found her seat. They rode east toward the mountains, following a trail that climbed through stands of pine and aspen. The air grew cooler as they gained elevation, and Penelope breathed deeply, savoring the scent of evergreen and earth. Quentin rode beside her, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the land. "That outcropping there, the one that looks like a man's profile, we call it Sleeping Chief. The Navajo have a different name for it, but I do not know what it is. They were here long before any of us whites arrived, of course." He glanced at her. "There is still tension sometimes between the ranchers and the native peoples. The government moved most of them to reservations, but some still come through on their old hunting grounds. I try to respect their rights, let them pass peacefully. Most of my neighbors think I am a fool for it. I do not think you are a fool. I think you are decent. Decency is not always valued on the frontier." They stopped to rest beside a small spring that bubbled up between rocks, and Quentin helped Penelope dismount. Her legs were shaky from the unaccustomed riding, and she stumbled slightly. His hand steadied her, and suddenly they were standing very close, his face only inches from hers. "Penelope," he said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made her pulse race. "Yes. I know we have only known each other a few days. I know this arrangement between us is unconventional, but I want you to know that I am already coming to care for you deeply. You are exactly the kind of woman I had hoped for but hardly dared to expect." Her throat tightened with emotion. "Quentin, I feel the same. These past days have been the happiest I have known in years." You have been nothing but kind and respectful, and I find myself looking forward to our marriage with genuine anticipation rather than merely acceptance." He lifted one hand and cupped her cheek, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," she whispered. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if both of them were testing unfamiliar waters. But then Penelope felt something shift and deepen, a sudden rush of longing that took her breath away. She clutched at his shoulders and Quentin pulled her closer, his arms strong around her. The kiss became something more urgent, more passionate, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I did not expect that," Quentin said hoarsely. "Neither did I. Tomorrow the judge arrives. If you are willing, I would like to marry you as soon as possible." Penelope smiled, feeling a joy she had never anticipated. "I am willing." The wedding took place the following afternoon in the small church in Aztec, with only James and Tom as witnesses. Penelope wore her best dress, a deep blue silk she had made herself years ago, and Quentin wore a clean white shirt and string tie. The circuit judge, a grizzled man named Samuel Porter, conducted the ceremony with brisk efficiency, and within 15 minutes Penelope Everton became Penelope Garrett. As they left the church, Quentin lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "Mrs. Garrett, I like the sound of that." "So do I," she said softly. They celebrated with a meal at the hotel restaurant, a rare indulgence, and then drove back to the ranch as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The hired men had made themselves scarce, leaving the house to the newlyweds, and when Quentin closed the door behind them, the silence was charged with anticipation. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Yes, but in a good way." Penelope turned to face him. "I am 38 years old, Quentin, but I have no experience with the marriage bed. I hope you will be patient with me." His expression softened with tenderness. "We have all the time in the world. There is no rush." He took her hand and led her to his bedroom, which was now their bedroom. In the fading light, they undressed each other slowly, with a mixture of awkwardness and growing confidence. Penelope felt self-conscious about her body, about the signs of age that marked it, but the way Quentin looked at her dispelled her fears. "You are beautiful," he murmured, trailing kisses along her shoulder. "Every part of you." Their lovemaking was tender and unhurried, a discovery of each other that left Penelope trembling with emotions she had never experienced. She had expected physical pleasure, but she had not anticipated the profound sense of connection, the feeling of being truly seen and valued. Afterward they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Quentin stroked her hair with gentle fingers. "Are you all right?" "More than all right. I feel as though I have been waiting my entire life for this moment." "So do I." He kissed her forehead. "Sleep now. Tomorrow, we begin our life together in earnest." The months that followed were marked by a deepening love and understanding between them. Penelope threw herself into managing the household, and her capable hands brought order and beauty to the ranch. She planted a kitchen garden, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn soil. She sewed new curtains for the windows and made quilts to keep them warm through the coming winter. She learned to ride well enough to accompany Quentin when he checked on the cattle, and she discovered a surprising affinity for ranch life. Quentin, for his part, proved to be everything Penelope could have hoped for in a husband. He was steady and reliable, hard-working but never neglectful of their time together. He treated her as an equal partner, asking her opinion on ranch decisions and listening carefully to her ideas. And in their private moments, he was an attentive and passionate lover who made her feel desirable and cherished. In late August, a group of travelers passed through, heading west toward California. They stopped at the ranch to ask permission to water their stock at the creek, and Quentin welcomed them with the hospitality expected on the frontier. There were 3 families, travel-worn and weary, with children who looked half-starved. Penelope immediately set about preparing food, and soon the smell of frying bacon and fresh bread filled the air. The women in the party looked at her with gratitude that bordered on reverence. "Bless you, madam," one of them said. She was young, perhaps 25, with a baby on her hip and 2 other small children clinging to her skirts. "We have been on short rations for weeks now. You are welcome to whatever we can spare," Penelope said warmly. "How much farther do you have to travel, all the way to Sacramento?" "We have family there who promised us work and a place to stay." While the travelers ate, Penelope packed a basket of supplies for them, including flour, beans, and dried beef. Quentin, seeing what she was doing, added a side of bacon and several jars of preserves. "You are very generous," Penelope said to him as they watched the travelers depart the following morning, their wagon heavy with supplies. "We have enough to share, and you were right to feed them. No one should go hungry if we can prevent it." The incident brought them even closer, confirming to Penelope that she had chosen well. Quentin was not just a good man. He was a kind one, with a sense of justice and compassion that matched her own values. In October, Penelope realized her monthly courses had stopped. At first, she dismissed it as a sign of her age, but when the nausea began and her breasts became tender, she allowed herself to hope. She waited another month to be certain before telling Quentin. She chose a quiet evening when they were sitting together by the fire, her sewing in her lap and his account books spread on the table. "Quentin, I have something to tell you." He looked up, his expression immediately attentive. "What is it?" "I am with child." For a long moment he simply stared at her, his face blank with shock. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his features, transforming him. He set aside the books and crossed to her, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Truly, you are certain as I can be. I know I am older than most women who bear children, but you are perfect." He kissed her deeply, then dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her still flat belly. "A child, our child. Penelope, I never thought I would have this." Tears streamed down her face. "Neither did I. I had resigned myself to never being a mother. You will be a wonderful mother, and I will do my best to be a good father." He stood and cupped her face in his hands. "We will need to be careful with you. I will not have you taking risks." "I am not made of glass, Quentin. Women have been bearing children since the beginning of time. Not my woman, not my wife carrying my child." His protectiveness touched her even as it amused her. "I promise to be sensible, but I will not become an invalid." The pregnancy progressed well through the winter months. Penelope experienced some nausea in the early weeks, but it passed, and she bloomed with health. Quentin fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and work less, and while she found his attention somewhat excessive, she was also deeply moved by his devotion. In February of 1884, when the snow lay thick on the ground and the mountains were white against the blue sky, Penelope went into labor. Quentin had arranged for a midwife from Aztec to stay at the ranch as her time approached, and the woman, a capable Mexican woman named Rosa, took charge with calm efficiency. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the following day. Quentin paced outside the bedroom door, his face haggard with worry while Rosa worked with Penelope. Finally, as the sun began to set on the second day, a thin wail pierced the air. Rosa emerged from the bedroom, her face wreathed in smiles. "You have a son, Senator Garrett, a strong, healthy boy." Quentin rushed past her into the room, where Penelope lay exhausted but radiant, their newborn son cradled in her arms. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and his eyes, when they fluttered open, were the same whiskey brown as his father's. "Look what we made," Penelope whispered, her voice hoarse from hours of labor. Quentin sat carefully on the edge of the bed and touched one finger to the baby's tiny hand. The infant grasped it instinctively, and Quentin's eyes filled with tears. "He is perfect. You are perfect." "Thank you, Penelope. Thank you for this gift." They named him Daniel, after Penelope's father, and he became the center of their world. Quentin proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to bring the baby to Penelope for feeding, changing soiled napkins without complaint, and spending hours simply watching his son sleep. As Daniel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Quentin expanded the herd and purchased more land, and Penelope took in sewing from the ladies in Aztec, building a small but steady business. They hired a young woman from town to help with the housework and the baby, freeing Penelope to focus on her needlework and her family. Daniel took his first steps on a warm June morning, toddling across the porch into his father's waiting arms. Quentin swept him up with a shout of joy, and Penelope laughed at the sight of her serious, hard-working husband reduced to childlike delight by their son's achievement. In the evenings, after Daniel was asleep, Quentin and Penelope would sit together on the porch as they had from the beginning, watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky. Sometimes they talked, and sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, content in each other's presence. "You ever regret it?" Quentin asked one night. "Leaving Boston, coming out here to marry a stranger?" Penelope turned to look at him, this man who had become her entire world. "Never, not for a single moment. You gave me everything I had given up hoping for, Quentin. Love, family, purpose, a home. You gave me the same, more than the same." He raised her hand to his lips. "I love you, Penelope. I loved you from the moment I saw you step off that stage, and I love you more with each passing day. And I love you. Age has only made you more handsome," she added with a teasing smile. He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." When Daniel was 2 years old, Penelope discovered she was expecting again. This pregnancy was harder than the first, leaving her tired and sick for months. Quentin worried constantly, but Penelope remained optimistic. "Women bear multiple children all the time," she reminded him. "I am healthy and strong. You are also 41 years old. That is not young for childbearing. But it is not impossible. Have faith, Quentin." In March of 1886, she gave birth to a daughter, a tiny, perfect girl with auburn hair and gray eyes. They named her Catherine, after Quentin's first wife, and the gesture seemed to bring a kind of peace to him, a final laying to rest of the past. Catherine was a quieter baby than Daniel had been, content to lie in her cradle and observe the world with solemn eyes. Daniel adored his baby sister, bringing her his toys and patting her head with chubby, gentle hands. The years flowed past like water. Daniel grew tall and strong, taking after his father in temperament and build. Catherine became a bright, curious child who followed her mother everywhere, learning to sew and cook and manage a household. Quentin's hair turned completely silver, but he remained vigorous and active, managing the ranch with the help of his growing son. Penelope aged too, her auburn hair fading to gray, new lines etching themselves around her eyes and mouth. But Quentin's love never wavered. He still looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in his world, still pulled her close at night and whispered words of love and devotion. When Daniel turned 18, he began courting a girl from Aztec, the daughter of the general store owner. She was a sweet, practical girl named Mary, and Penelope approved wholeheartedly. The wedding took place in the spring of 1902, and Quentin cried unabashedly as he watched his son pledge his life to his bride. "I never thought I would live to see this day," he said to Penelope as they danced at the reception. "Our son, grown and married. Where did the years go?" "They went into building a life," Penelope said softly. "A good life full of love and meaning. I would not change a single moment of it." Daniel and Mary built a house on the far edge of the ranch property. And within a year, they presented Quentin and Penelope with their first grandchild, a robust boy they named Quentin Daniel. Holding her grandson in her arms, Penelope felt a profound sense of completion, as if all the pieces of her life had finally fallen into perfect alignment. Catherine showed no interest in marriage, preferring to focus on her education. Quentin hired a tutor for her, and she proved to be a brilliant student, particularly in mathematics and literature. Eventually, she announced her intention to become a teacher, and both her parents supported her wholeheartedly. In 1905, Catherine opened a small school in Aztec, teaching the children of ranchers and townspeople alike. She was an excellent teacher, patient and enthusiastic, and she quickly became beloved in the community. Penelope was immensely proud of her daughter's accomplishments. The ranch continued to thrive under Quentin's management, with Daniel taking on more and more responsibility as his father aged. By 1910, Quentin was 69 years old, and while he remained active, the years had taken their toll. His joints ached in cold weather, and he tired more easily than he once had. Penelope, at 65, had slowed down as well, but she remained sharp and engaged with life. She still took in sewing, though her fingers were not as nimble as they once had been, and she devoted much of her time to her grandchildren. Daniel and Mary had 4 children now, ranging in age from 8 to 15, and they filled the ranch with laughter and energy. One evening in late summer, Quentin and Penelope sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, painting the mountains in shades of purple and pink. Daniel and his family had just left after Sunday dinner, and the house was quiet. 27 years, Quentin said suddenly. Has it really been that long since you stepped off that stage in Aztec? It has. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. You have given me the best years of my life, Penelope. I want you to know that. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. And you have given me the same. I came here expecting duty and obligation, perhaps a measure of companionship. I never dreamed I would find such deep and abiding love. When I first saw you, I knew immediately that you were older than you had claimed in your letters, but I also knew in that instant that you were exactly who I had been waiting for. Age did not matter. It never mattered. All that mattered was the woman you were, the strength and grace and beauty that shone from within. Tears slipped down Penelope's cheeks. You have told me that many times over the years, but it never fails to move me. It is the truth. It will always be the truth. He took her hand, his grip still strong despite the years. I love you, Penelope Garrett. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Quentin, always and forever. They sat together as the stars began to appear. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life of meaning and purpose. The mail-order bride who had feared rejection for her age, and the cowboy who had seen only beauty in her years, had created something precious and enduring. In the years that followed, they remained devoted to each other and to the family they had built. Daniel took over full management of the ranch when Quentin turned 72, allowing his father to enjoy a well-earned retirement. Quentin spent his days raiding, working in the garden Penelope had started so many years before, and playing with his grandchildren. Catherine eventually married a fellow teacher, a quiet, scholarly man who adored her, and they had 2 children of their own. The family gatherings grew larger and more boisterous, filling the ranch house with multiple generations. Penelope lived to see her great-grandchildren, a blessing she had never anticipated. When her first great-granddaughter was born in 1918, she held the tiny infant and marveled at the miracle of it all. From a lonely spinster facing destitution in Boston to a beloved matriarch surrounded by family, her life had been transformed beyond recognition. Quentin passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1920, at the age of 79. Penelope was devastated by the loss, but she took comfort in the certainty that they had loved each other well and completely. She lived for another 5 years, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and when she died at the age of 80, it was with a sense of profound gratitude for the life she had been given. At her funeral, Daniel stood before the assembled crowd and spoke of his mother with deep emotion. She came to this land as a mail-order bride, uncertain and afraid, and she built a legacy of love that will endure for generations. She taught us all what it means to face life with courage and grace, to love without reservation, and to find beauty in every stage of life. My father always said that age only made her more beautiful, and he was right. She grew more beautiful with every passing year, not in spite of her age but because of it. The wisdom and strength and compassion that came with her years made her the woman we all loved and admired. As they laid Penelope to rest beside Quentin in the small cemetery overlooking the ranch, a gentle breeze stirred the desert grass, carrying with it the scent of sage and wildflowers. The sun shone warm and bright, illuminating the mountains in the distance, and somewhere in the valley below, a hawk cried out, its voice echoing across the vast expanse of sky. The story of the mail-order bride and the cowboy who loved her became a cherished family legend, passed down through the generations. Their descendants continued to work the ranch, honoring the legacy of hard work, integrity, and devotion that Quentin and Penelope had established. The house they had shared remained in the family, carefully preserved, a testament to the love that had flourished within its walls. And though the frontier they had known gradually gave way to modernity, though the Wild West became a thing of history and legend, the love story of Quentin and Penelope Garrett endured. It was a reminder that true love recognizes no barriers, that age is not a limitation but a gift, and that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. In the end, what mattered was not that Penelope had been older than expected when she stepped off that stage in Aztec, New Mexico territory, on that May Day in 1883. What mattered was that Quentin had seen her true worth, had recognized the beauty of her character and spirit, and had loved her for exactly who she was. Together, they had built a life of purpose and meaning, a family that would carry their values forward into future generations, and a love story that would be remembered and celebrated long after they were gone. Their marriage had begun with uncertainty and fear, with Penelope's deception about her age and her desperate need for security. But it had transformed into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. In choosing each other, in committing to building a life together despite the unconventional circumstances of their meeting, they had discovered a love that transcended the practical arrangements of a mail-order marriage. Quentin had meant every word he spoke on that first day when he told Penelope that age had only made her more beautiful. Over the years of their marriage, he had proven it again and again, cherishing her through every stage of life, finding new reasons to love her with each passing year. And Penelope, who had feared rejection and loneliness, had found in Quentin a partner who valued her for everything she was, who saw her not as a woman past her prime but as a woman in full flower. Their story was a testament to the power of second chances, to the possibility of finding love when least expected, and to the truth that real beauty has nothing to do with youth and everything to do with character. It was a story of courage, of taking risks and trusting in the kindness of strangers, of building something lasting from the most fragile beginnings. The ranch they had built together, the family they had raised, the love they had shared, all of it stood as a monument to what could be achieved when two people committed themselves fully to each other and to the life they were building together. From the dusty street in Aztec, where they first met, to the final days when they sat together watching the desert sunset, Quentin and Penelope had walked their path hand in hand, partners in every sense of the word. And so, the story of the mail-order bride who was older than expected and the cowboy who said age only made her more beautiful came to its natural conclusion, not with tragedy or regret, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, a love well spent, and a legacy that would endure for generations to come. It was, in every sense, a story of triumph over adversity, of hope fulfilled, and of love conquering all obstacles. It was, quite simply, a story of two souls finding each other across the distance and building something beautiful together in the wild, untamed landscape of the American frontier.